Joey, let's go ahead and get kicked off with our capstone demo days here. So I'll share my screen real quick. I know we've all done this many times now, but just for the recording, so everyone has it. So as always, go around the room. Everyone just share a little bit about what you've done since your last capstone update. Everyone has 2 minutes to talk about what you've learned, all that good stuff. Take a minute or so roughly, talk about any updates you have, then recommend the next minute for screen sharing, or if you want to share your screen the whole time, that's fine too. As always, peer reviews, I'll post these links in the Slack channel in just a minute, just so everyone has them handy. And then in terms of where we kind of think you should be at, just as a little baseline. So I know that right now you're actively learning React. So over the next couple of weeks, starting to think about how you'd incorporate React into your project, maybe having some really lightweight Reacts by the 21st, in that week of the 21st, putting some React in your projects. And then just looking forward in the next module in the next couple of weeks with Max and Gus, you'll be learning server-side programming with Node.js. And so you'll ultimately create your own APIs. So just kind of looking forward into the coming weeks. We recommend by the end of the next module, module 7, having your own API stood up, if applicable for your capstone. And then, ideally using your React app to interface with your API and call data from it. So again, just kind of looking forward here, just to kind of what to expect in the upcoming modules, and then kind of how you can incorporate that into your capstone projects. And then, as always, I'll send the poll shortly as well on Slack, just for thoughts on where everyone's at. I think that's it. We'll kind of go from there. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop sharing my screen. And then, Brandy, if you want to go ahead and kick it off here. Brandy, are you with us tonight? I don't think I saw her in the chat. All right, we will skip over Brandy. I'll circle back in case she joins in a minute. Brielle, you want to go ahead and give a capstone update?
Sure. I'm actually really excited about the React we've been learning, and I've decided to switch my whole project over, and I'm in the process of being able to take the pieces of what I've already done and putting it in. And the reusable components idea is it's just brilliant to me. With my project, I was going to have locations and things to do in central New York, and I have about a spreadsheet of 150 different places. So the idea that I can just create a template and have it fill in with the information was very exciting, instead of making 150 HTML pages. And so I'm in the process of switching that over. And then I've also been looking at how I'm going to be structuring my data to be able to call it from some of the things we've learned with calling the data in React. So that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Brielle. All right. Next up, Dominique, if you want to go ahead and give an update.
Sure. Hey everyone. I'm pretty much where Brielle is right now. I was able to do all my pages, and then while learning React, since I have a bunch of collections of all types of resources, it just seems like React's going to be the way to go. So I'm pretty much dissecting page by page right now what I can and what I can't do right now. So pretty much still where I am. Just added some more pages and now trying to add React to my capstone.
Awesome. Thanks, Dominique. Next up, Alina, if you want to give an update.
I actually don't have much of an update on my capstone, just because the more that we've been learning and stuff like that, I kind of want to change my capstone again, because I was under the impression that we had to create a full stack website. And now that we're learning React and we're learning JavaScript and like that, I kind of just want to do something small and really be able to show off my skills and everything that I've learned in the program and do a really, really good job at it. Because I feel like if I were to do something like a full website, that I'm just going to get lost and I wouldn't present something that I would be happy with in the end versus presenting something that's more polished. So that's where I am.
Cool. Thanks, Lena. And just to that kind of thought, Lena, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that kind of many of you are in that boat as well a little bit. and sort of think about your scope overall. We would recommend, to try to incorporate, and this is for everyone.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try and incorporate more
Yeah.
like everything that I've got going on so far. But like I said, I kind of just want to scale it down just so I can really show off the skills and then be proud of something that I'm going to present to future employers or at the end of the program or whatever.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So incorporate as much as you can, but if you have to narrow the scope, like that's totally fine. And that goes for everyone. So thank you, Lena. All right. Next up, Jahil, you want to give an update?
Yeah, so I know it's been like a while, so I have a lot of things. I'm not gonna show every single thing because I guess like a lot of components aren't gonna work. But yeah, so for Grammar Goblins, I came up with an idea pretty much to scope it out first because I want to do the I want to have the functionality first before I try to do the multiplayer and stuff like that and animations. So I asked myself a couple of questions like how am I gonna go about it? So like I need problems for my for my quiz like game or whatever. So then I decided, hey, I should make a web page here that I designed or whatever to like get the data to inject it, and then I want to convert it into a JSON file or whatever. It's not done anymore because anyways, I'll show you what I have. I'm gonna screen share right now. Let's see. My desktop. There we go. Here we go. Nope, I'm so sorry. That's cool. So this is the web page that I have right now. So right now you can enter your name or whatever. The reason why I wanted to add the name input was because I wanted to make sure that you can sort the data later or whatever. Right here, this is the text area. Like this is where you put the like sentences or whatever or words that you want to like kind of make a problem or whatever. Like so basically this is what the goblin's gonna say. This would be the word grabber. So basically it's gonna take the word up there and is visible. Okay, so it's gonna take the word up there, it's gonna replace it with one of these solutions. And you're gonna actually have to, decide like maybe a multiple choice or either a drag and drop. And this is with the game interface. This is not it currently. This is just an injection of the problems. So with the late word, whatever you place it, I can add a solution. Another one, it could be wrong or a correct solution if it's correct. Like, I don't know, like it might be like this or whatever. Like you can put it down, it's correct, but you can have more than one or whatever, or two. You can do up to 4 because that's the limit that I gave it. So late or whatever, that's going to replace it or right. And then, yeah, that's it. Well, it is visible, whatever. And then I'm gonna add another, no, I'll just keep it like this. I'll add another word grab, I guess. Yeah, sure. My fault. So right now I'm just gonna inject the data. I'm just showing you that I guess the adding component is available. Let me just move this over. I'll submit this right here. Right now you can't see what happened, but basically I injected the data console log as an object. So now, since I put my name Giles Smith right here, it's right there. I'll show you the properties, make it less complicated or whatever. But basically, this is the latent thing right there. That's what I got from right here. It's going to replace it, inject it, and save it as a quote unquote string. Right now, I can't do that because it's not like, I guess, like you can't use require just with HTML or something like that by itself. And then this is the code that I have right now. So I'm going to rework this in Bootstrap. What I did initially was like I made a another separate script or whatever.
Jahil, sorry. You're at time, Jahil, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Jahil. All right, next up, Karen, if you want to give an update. Is Karen on? Let's see, don't see Karen. I'll circle back with her. So next up, Kyle, want to give an update?
Yeah, so I don't have a lot to show tonight because I've mainly been researching content so that when I bring my website over to React, I'll have stuff to put in there. So I'm close to selecting my sites. That's basically where I'm at right now. And then writing up, I'm going to go into the Onondaga Historical Association and get a little assistance from them as well to write up stuff and select some images. And I've also been planning what features I'm going to include in my project. So I'm working on that. And to that end, my paper lists were getting a little out of hand. So I created a Trello board and I'm trying that out. And I kind of created different to-do categories within the Trello board, like to do for planning and preparation, to do for content, and to do for coding. So that's been helping me out a little bit. Yeah, so that's where I'm at this week.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. All right. Next up, Latanya, you want to give an update? I think you might be talking on mute.
I'm sorry, folks. Do you see my screen? You see my palm tree? Okay. So I just put up the wireframe that I did just so you can have a comparison and see that I'm pretty much on track. These were supposed to be white to begin with, so I just kind of cleared that up. And I'm really happy that it's scaling down pretty well on there. When you see this section here, there's going to be two sections, one over the body links, which is this part, one underneath the body links, over what is here now, which is the footer. So if you can envision that. And then I have this stuff in here, which may or may not stay the same content at this point, but I wanted to get it in there so pretty much I can tweak it out easier and decide if I want to, add any different stuff or what have you, and then just get this stuff wired up. So I'm pretty happy with where this is right now. Once I do this part, I'm pretty sure that's going to be in React. I just really like the efficiency of what that allows. So then I also reached out for feedback on my Trello board. And so I put in another slide, and it talks about the feedback that I requested, the different questions that I put out to people, and then what I received. I put it out to 3 people. One person responded. All 3 of them I'm now connected on LinkedIn. And one of them also joined Trello, giving me the gold level, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but I don't know how to use it. And then this is my response to the feedback. And it was really good because it helped me to kind of clarify some of the stuff that I have on the Trello board. So I'm happy that I did that. It was it didn't feel great when I did it, but in hindsight, I'm really happy that I did it because the insight was helpful. And so pretty much that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Latanya. I appreciate you sharing. And I would encourage everyone as well, if you have thoughts, feedback, kind of validating some of your ideas to your capstone, feel free to reach out to folks in the community, even just sending a Slack message to like the general or projects channel. Like folks are happy to connect and, offer thoughts and advice and feedback. So, I mean, it kind of helps to validate, the work that you're doing. So awesome work. All right, next up, Mel, if you want to give an update. I think you might be on mute, Mel.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right, yeah. So since the last time, I've started to move my capstone over to React. I've got all my components here with the SAS files link, and I'll start it up. Well, this is what it looks like right now. I've only got the header and the footer right now. I've also got the pages linked with a React router. So this is the home page. I just got one card in there right now. This is what it's gonna look like. I've also got the wish list page linked as well, and the blog page as well. So that's where I'm at. I'm just moving everything over to React, and this is what it looks like so far. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mel. Nice work. All right. Next up, Sarah, gonna go ahead and get an update.
Yeah, so I don't have anything new to share because everything looks pretty much the same as last time, but I've also been transitioning everything over to React. And I've got everything, pretty much everything that makes sense as a component converted over right now. I've also just started using Sass, so I've been cleaning up my CSS a lot. Other than that, just trying to get more organized, but that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. All right. Next up, Shaw, you want to give an update?
Hi, everyone. Yes, let me share my screen. Actually, I don't have much of an update. I've added a few pages. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Great, yeah. I added a few more pages, but I haven't linked them. I also finished the photo. Also made some cosmetic changes like space, font, color, and other stuff to make it look more professional. Yeah, that's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Shaw.
Thanks.
All right, then next up we have Susan. Want to give an update?
Sure. I don't have anything physical to show either because I've just been trying to really learn React so I can understand it because I think also it will help me as well. Just with the concerts being things that like Brielle was saying, with all the info and just having the repetition and being able to plug in your info and just update that way. And I do have a list of the concerts that I want to include. And that's it, just really trying to learn the React so I can understand it. I don't know, I might need help when I do the converting if I can't get it myself done, but that's what I'd like to do. So that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Thanks, Susan. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to demo anything for the Capstone Demo Day? Brandy or Karen, I don't think I saw them join back.
Miss Lobelia.
Oh, Phobia, is there anything you'd like to share? If not, you don't have to.
Oh, thank you. No, nothing new today. I'm still focused on learning React.
Thanks, Phobia. And then Carolyn, is there anything you wanted to share for today? If not, no worries.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
I came to the realization that I can't do this from scratch from memory and have it work. So I reached out to Bootstrap. Let me share my screen. Desktop. Get rid of the stuff that's in the way here. Coding, coding, coding. All right, let's see where to go. Hold on. Zoom keeps putting things in my face, so I've got to quit here. Trying to get my, there we go. All right. So I've been playing around and it's gone through several iterations yesterday and today. These aren't necessarily colors I'm going to have. I'm just trying to define sections. My nav bar has been like the thing that's been the most difficult, as a lot of people can attest to. And I had a couple drop downs and they disappeared on me, even though they were in the code. So I've got to figure that out. The only page I've updated the code today in is the index. So the other ones are still looking like they were. And I did put some stuff in Slack yesterday and I'll put more. But there is some responsiveness. The only problem is my hamburger went away since this morning. So I got to figure out that out too. And I'm trying to do a little JavaScript in there. I'm using CSS right now until I feel I can jump into the other, and React will come eventually. But you know, there's not as much to show for the time I spent, but it's really fun. So that's where I'm at right now, and I can share a little more in Slack as you know time goes by. So one thing that did kind of hit me the other day too is being a health website, essentially mental health. Couple things, making sure that in the README file and whatever I include on the page, you know, there's a real disclaimer that I'm not, the person that created this is not a doctor, et cetera, et cetera. But also the security aspect, no matter who the users are, because they'll be writing journals and, you know, things like that. So And the security module coming up, that might be helpful for me. So I'm looking forward to that too. But I'm just happy I'm getting somewhere with this because I've been putting tons of hours and getting nowhere and not asking for help, which seems to be my way. But that's what I have. So I'm much happier than I was last time because I had lost all my files and I found them. So
Thank you, Carolyn.
thanks, Jesse.
All right. Anyone else that joined late? Karen or Brandy? I don't think I saw them rejoin. All right. So with that, concludes our demo day. Awesome work, everyone. It's been really cool to start seeing folks kind of integrating React more into their HTML components and whatnot. What do you guys think of React so far? A little better than writing HTML a million times, right? The same components over and over, a little easier. Cool. I'll open the floor up, if anyone has any questions, thoughts, feedback. But seriously, awesome work, everyone. It's really pretty amazing to see, every 2 weeks how much progress you have on these projects. So you should all be very proud. But open up any thoughts, questions, feedback for a couple minutes.
Actually, I had a question. I don't know if you could answer it or someone else, but like Brielle said, she had a database and I just have like a list. Like I don't have a database. Like, would you guys recommend that because we didn't do like our own APIs yet? I just don't know how I should be organizing my information now. But if there a best way for me to do it now, so I'm prepared.
Yeah, so when it comes to the data, structure the data so that eventually when you do have a database, it'll make sense to have it in the database that way. That way you can also work on your front end pieces now. And then when you have an endpoint that gets data from your database, you don't have to worry about the shape of that data changing, right? You don't have to redo anything. So think about how your data needs to be shaped now on the front end, and then you can structure it on the back end that way later, at least as a start.
So would you suggest that I use a spreadsheet or something?
Well, if you're going to be injecting it into your site or whatever app you're working on, I would put it like, say, in a JSON file, right? Structure that JSON file the way you expect your endpoint to give it to you. That way, you don't have to change that shape later on. Now you can say, okay, well, I know my endpoint's going to give me an array of these objects. They're going to have this shape with these properties, right? And that way you can work towards your endpoints that way as well. Now, along the road, you may change the shape a little bit here and there, but at least if you have it in JSON format, that's what the API is going to give you anyway. So you may as well just expect that to be coming from the endpoint. So you can save it in a JSON file somewhere, and you can import it the same way you can import any module. And we can go over a little bit of that today too, if that'll help. In fact, it'd be a good thing for everyone to see how you can just import JSON just from a file for testing purposes.
I'll just echo everything Joey said. So like you'll learn like the ins and outs of databases in module 8, which is week 18. So, 4 or 5 weeks from now. But yeah, assume everything in JSON, static, and then eventually you'll get that into a database in some capacity, and then you'll use an API interface with that database, but it'll all be in JSON format. So just hammer home the JSON. Assume JSON, and you'll be all good. Really good question, Susan. Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts, feedback?
I just wanted to echo what Jesse said. Great work, everybody. I especially liked, seeing. I feel bad, Mel's screen hadn't been working, but it was awesome to see, the progress that you've been shown, Mel and Jahil. Just really enjoyed seeing folks. Just the progress. It's awesome.
Thanks, Jason. All right, any other thoughts, feedback? Going once? Going twice? All right, thanks everyone. Again, awesome work. As you all know, in 2 weeks, we'll have another one of these, but seriously, like really good work so far, everyone. And the more you keep learning, the more you'll be able to keep incorporating into your capstone. So again, you should be very proud. celebrate your victories, celebrate those wins. It's really important to kind of reflect on, we're already 14 weeks into it. It's crazy. So again, it's important to take a step back. What did you know, 3 months ago, right? Use that as a baseline, and she'll be very proud. So thanks everyone. With that, I'll hand it back over to Joey and Caitlin, and everyone have a great rest of your night.
All right, guys. All right, so where did we leave off? We left off with, did everyone pull the latest? I wonder if,
Was there more since the weekend? Do we need to pull again?
no, wherever we left off last night is essentially.
Because I didn't pull since then, should I be?
Let's see, let me just double check.
I was working on my capstone all day.
Oh, it looks like I got to redo my pull request. Hold on one second, guys. So while we are waiting for me to do this, 1 second. What questions do you guys have? Let's start there. Let's give you guys a few minutes to ask some questions. If there's anything that's confusing you that we went over yesterday, or any other general things that we need to think about. Anything? So it's nice to hear that you folks are excited about React and converting some of your projects to it, so that's good. As you get working with this more and more, you'll find that whole composability of all these different components together and the reusability is really powerful. And React isn't the only library or framework that does things that are. There are other frameworks that do things that are similar. The reason I connect with React so well is because it looks just like HTML, except that it's got a bunch of JavaScript hanging around it. So for me, that's a big win for me. So let's see. Give me 1 second, guys. This was we're on week 3 already. Today's Tuesday. I don't even know what day it is anymore. Day's kind of blurred by all over the place. All right, cool. So we're gonna push this up. I'd show you guys this process, but I'm not supposed to show you the some of the security things that I go through. So the latest the GitHub repo. So for anyone that was not able to follow along all the way last night, or wasn't able to grab the files out of the pasted code chat, or if you had some issues, you'll be able to pull this down in just a moment here. And we can all get back up on the same page. New pull request. Great. Okay, so if you pull from the repo now, you'll have everything that I just pushed up. Looks like there were a couple files that were still hanging out. But I got everything. Yeah, so I'll let you guys take a minute to pull down in case you haven't done so. Or if you want to continue on where you're at, if you have the same, if the files haven't changed for you, that's fine too. Let's see. don't know if you can hear my daughter away in the background or not. Yes, no? Okay, good. Sounds like she's throwing a fit. Let's delete. There we go.
I have a question when you have a
Yeah.
minute.
You got it. Ask away.
I'm a little confused about the logical and on like the one, for example, the one we did last night on the search page. I looked at the MDN docs for it, and in the example there, it makes sense to me because it says that it's for a set of operands is true only if, sorry, it's true if and only if all of its operands are true. And that example makes sense, but in this one, it seems like the stuff at the end, like the last double ampersand is almost like a then type of like, you know, if items in query are true, then this, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really understand the structure of it, because it doesn't seem like you could find out if that last part is true or not. Like, I don't know.
That's a great question. And yeah, absolutely. Let's go over that. So let me start up I should share my screen. I realized I wasn't doing that. Let me share this. Okay, so everyone should see my VS Code, right? Oops. And I am in, what was that? That was inside search page. We were doing that?
Yep.
Yeah, I think. All right. Search. Oh, right here. Oh. Here's what I'm going to start that one on. Okay, cool. So we've got items and query and this other thing. So when you have a statement like this, where you have a bunch of logical operators in it, that is because we're evaluating this, we're evaluating an expression in JavaScript. And whenever you evaluate an expression, you get back a result. Now, in this case, we're checking to see if this is true, if this is true, and if this is true. Technically, that's what we're doing, right? And what's going to happen is it's going to say, okay, well, this is true, so I can keep going. This is true, so I can keep going. Now, this is a truthy value. So, and that's the last thing. So I'm going to return that. So it's like a trick to say, okay, I'm always going to return whatever's at the end with logical and. I have to go all the way to the end of that expression in order to figure out if it's true or false. So because this is the last item, technically that's what I'm returning. So out of these two curly braces here, what ends up getting returned from this whole expression is the thing I want to render. Does that make sense? Sort of. So if this was, so here's the difference between.
It's like on the MDN docs, it does a console log and it returns the whole, oh no, it just returns false. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, so if I have just two things like items and, you know, some text, because I'm using logical and, I have to check every single one of the items that it's comparing against. Now, since this is the last one it checks, that's what gets returned to me. Whereas if this was a logical or, it's going to return the first thing that's true. Now, if items was true, then it would return whatever items is. If items was false, it would return whatever comes afterwards. Whereas if it's logical and, I'm going to return the last thing if this whole statement is true. Now, if this whole statement is, if one part of this logical statement is false, it's going to be false. It's going to return the first false. But
because it's in a return?
Because it's an expression. Every expression returns a value.
Right, but I thought it was
Whether,
supposed to return either true or false, not part of the,
well, it's going to return the last thing. It's
okay.
just so happens that it's a truthy value. Like this string of text is considered true in JavaScript. It's not false. It's if false would be like an empty string, or the value false or null or undefined. Those are considered falsy, right? But it would return that, but it would be like the value of false or undefined. Whereas here, it's returning this value, which is, it's a truthy value, so it returns that thing. Now,
It returns that actual value, or returns true because that value is true?
it returns that value.
Okay.
But that value is considered true because it's not a falsy one. So it's like it goes along the lines of coercion in JavaScript. So JavaScript handles certain things differently than a lot of other languages. If I were to have, let's say, let me go up to the top here, so I'm not getting all kinds of weird syntax errors. In fact, I'll get one there too. One second. If I were to have an if statement, and let's just take that same thing. We'll say items and some text or something, right? And then this will, do this stuff if true, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm saying this, compare these two things. So is this, well, not compare it, but is this thing true? Okay, cool. I'll keep going. Is this thing true? Technically, according to JavaScript, yes, it is. It's considered truthy. So I'll do these things, right?
Right, that makes, yeah.
So what's happening here is, yeah, it's the value that ends up in here is still this, but since this is considered truthy, it continues on with this. This evaluates to true in JavaScript. Whereas if I were to do this, this would not run at all because this is considered false. And since we're doing a logical and, both of these have to be true in order for this block of code to execute. It just so happens that what we're returning is this thing, and it's considered to be true, or in this case, it's considered to be false.
So maybe I just need to think that think of it as being like there's some curly brackets where that last double ampersand is. Is that?
So just remember that whatever's on the tail end of your double ampersands, that's the thing that's going to be returned in that expression if everything before it is true.
Okay.
Does that help? I know it's a little confusing.
That's nowhere in the MDN at all. It's just returning true or false.
Well,
yeah. So I did not understand that at all, but I guess I can just put that as a rule, and yeah, maybe it'll.
Yeah, that's. I mean, this is the way I've always understood it. Is that if you have a bunch of logical ands, return the last thing if everything else before it became true.
If everything is true. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of those weird JavaScript coercion trickery things. It's, yeah. It gets confusing sometimes. Let's get rid of this so we don't have a bunch of weird errors. Is everyone pulled down? They have all the latest, or they're at least the same point that we were last night. Some head nods, bunch of thumbs ups. That's fantastic. Okay, so let me start this up. npm start. You shouldn't need to do an npm install. We didn't install anything new, so I think you should be good there. So let's all start our solutions up. At least get something on the screen. And I keep, my chat keeps closing every time I share, and I keep forgetting to open it. Okay, no questions yet. And I should have, oh, it opened up over here. So my app is launching. Give myself enough space to see it. Switch over easily. All right, so I think I mentioned we were going to start working on the cart page and adding things to the cart from the product detail page. I think that's what we were going to do next. Because I believe our search page is completed. All right, so we should be able to search, filter on things. Yeah, looks like this is all working. Cool. Excellent. All right, so let's talk about adding things to the cart and displaying it on the page. So to do that, let's go up to our cart page, empty cart page JS file, or it just has placeholder in it, whatever it is. Let's get to there. The cart page itself, like the SAS file is already completed for us. There's quite a bit in here. So that's cool. So let's do the first thing. Let's just import our SAS file. So /cart page.css. And right now, we click cart. All we see is this. Looks like we did at least create that. Open up my notes. All right, so there is a bunch of markup in here. And that's simply because we're going to have a bunch of rows of items that we're going to have to think about. Have to think about having like headings above each row or each column to designate what is in that column. So we'll have one for the product, price, quantity, and total. In fact, let me pull this over, the completed one. All right, so we're going to have product, price, quantity, total for each one of those. Let's add something to the cart real quick. We're going to add that little toast in there as well at some point. That's another fun little library we can pull in. So here we have our products. Here's the price. We can update the quantity right from here. Right, same week we can do it on the product detail page. We'll have the same component. We'll just have to pass in the proper props to it so it works on this page as well. You'll see it totals everything up here. That's just simple math. And same with this as well. That's also simple math. Okay, cool. Let's move that off over here. And let's start flushing some stuff out. Actually, yeah, let's just start flushing a few things out. And then we're going to take a look at our wiki to see what we need to do to grab data from our cart endpoint. So we'll start with getting rid of this placeholder content. I'm just going to make this a multi-line return. I'm going to give this a class name of cart page. It looks like I added some padding in here. So we'll do PL-5, PR-5, and margin bottom, another 5 units there. Oh, that's to separate our cart stuff from the footer eventually. Next thing we'll do is we'll add in a heading. So this will be cart class name equals cart page _, oh, heading. This will have margin top of 4, margin bottom of 0, margin bottom on a medium-sized display of 3, and this is going to say your cart. So if we take a look, that's this thing right here. It says your cart. Say my cart, your cart, whatever you want. That's our heading. Now we have to actually create the rows that is going to hold all of our data. So this is just more markup. If you want to wait, I will paste the stuff in, or follow along for more practice. So cart page double underscore item headings. That's going to also be a class of row. So it's going to hold a bunch of columns. So we'll put in the columns for each one of the headings here. So the class name equals, now on mobile, we're not going to display it this way. Let's take a look at the mobile version. So on mobile, we're not displaying the headings at all. We're just displaying the item itself. So they're grouped together according to however the mockups were designed. So that's how I have done that. And for some reason, those mockups, I don't have a link to those anymore because in the Slack history reached a point where the link to those things dropped off. So I don't have access to those mockups anymore. I was like, oh no, how am I going to display it? But luckily, basically the completed app shows us essentially what that mockup looked like, except instead of these random pictures I got off the internet from free sources, by the way, I did not steal those. They would have shown like those handbags. Remember, if you remember from the mockups, it was like a handbag sort of e-commerce looking site. I think it was a Shopify theme, I think, if I remember properly. And because Shopify owns those images, can't really use them here. So you'll have to take my word for it that was the design, unless you saved the link to that. You can check it out, see how close we got. Okay, cool. So we're going to do display of none on mobile. On a medium-sized display, we'll do block so we can actually see it. The first one will be a column width of 5 out of 12 units. This will be for product. And what I'm essentially going to do here is I'm just going to copy these down. And there's a shortcut for copying an entire line down to the next row. And on a Mac, it's Shift, Alt, and then the down arrow key. So I'm going to create 3 copies of this. So that's a little shortcut for you. The second column is going to be 2 wide. The third one's going to be 3 wide. Last one's going to be 2. This will be price, quantity, and total. You can save yourself a lot of typing with a lot of these keyboard shortcuts. And you could also highlight, copy, and paste. You could do it that way. But those shortcuts are really nice. And the other cool thing about it is if you highlight a bunch of stuff, you can copy giant swaths of stuff using those same keyboard shortcuts. So again, that was Shift, Alt, or Shift Option, same key, Shift Option, and then down arrow key to copy it down, and the up arrow key actually copies it up to the previous line. Either way, it's a copy, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Cool. So now we have our headings. Then the next thing we're going to do is, well, here's the thing. We need to create another row, but we need to create a row for each different product, right? So I'm only have one on here, so it looks like there's only one row. But if I go back to my shop, add this, yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. And I'll add, let's say, the waterfall retreat, go to my cart. There's a row for each one of these things, right? So we have to grab the data out of our cart endpoint, take a look at it and see how we can make a row for each one of those things, right? Because if we just make one row and try to make columns in there, it could get a little hectic, right? So we want to make sure the same way that, let's see, what did we do it on? We did it on the, where did we do that? I'm trying to think. Oh, it was the same way that we iterated over the product cards and created a column for each product card, on the cart page, we're going to iterate over every item in the cart and give it its own row. And inside that row, we'll have the columns for each particular part of that product, whether it's the image or the price and so on. But each one of these has to be a row in order for them to display vertically like this in a logical way. Also, it'll help once we get to mobile, that all we have to do is worry about styling the columns inside instead of styling rows and calculating how many columns are on the screen per item, and it just gets crazy. So for every item in our cart, we're going to generate a new row. In order to do that, well, we got to get data from our cart. We got to map over it. The same way we map over products for product cards, we're going to map over items in our cart for our item rows on our cart page. So go up to the wiki. Let's take a look at our cart endpoints wiki. Now there's an API cart, which is a get, which gets us an object that represents the current state of the cart. Sounds like that's probably what we want. So let's just go down just a little bit further just to make sure. There's a cart add endpoint, pretty self-explanatory there, right? We're going to add stuff to the cart using that. There's a cart remove, so we can remove items from the cart. It's what's called a put, which means we're going to be changing the state of the cart. We're not adding something new, but we're changing the existing state of the cart. This also could have been a delete as well. You could do it a bunch of different ways. I've decided to keep everything kind of generic. All right, so sounds like we need API/cart to get all of our cart data. So let's take a look and see what we need to do. It says calling any cart endpoint will always return a copy of the newly updated cart. That's important to note, right? So anytime you call any of the cart endpoints, the response you get back is always going to be a copy of the cart as it exists now after whatever you did. Whether you're just calling it to get it, you're calling it to update it, or calling it to remove items from it. No matter what, we get back the entire cart as the response. So that's something to keep in mind as we go forward. So use this copy to update your local component state so that you're always presenting an accurate representation of the cart to the user. And that's why we get back the cart as the response anytime we call any cart endpoint, right? Because if I say, give me the cart, it's logically you get the cart. But if you add to the cart and you're on the cart page, as soon as you add, like you add another item, like another, back to here, I add another one of these, I want to see that updated value in here, right? Or if I remove it, as soon as I remove it, I want to see it gone from the cart, right? It wouldn't not make any sense to remove something from the cart and you still see it there until you refresh the page. That doesn't make any sense, right? You'd be like, thought I removed that thing. You need to be like smashing that button going, why isn't this removing? Oh my God, I'm never buying stuff from this website ever. And so you're gonna, you won't have any customers. So anytime we call any cart endpoint, we wanna make sure we get back the new state of the cart so we can update our display to reflect what it actually looks like on the back end. That's what that means. So let's get back to the cart endpoint. Does that make sense before I go further? You always want to show your user the result of what you did, right? And in this case, anytime we work with the cart, we're just going to get back the whole thing so we can determine what we need to update. Cool. Here it says you can pass the optional test param set to true to receive an example cart item list. That's actually what we're doing here. We're calling the cart endpoint with a parameter of test. And that's how we get our example data on the homepage. That's actually the endpoint you guys were calling all along when we were working on that. Okay, so yeah, so that's done. We don't need to worry about sending tests anymore. All right, so here's what we need to send. Apparently, there's only one option, whether test is true or not. We're not going to send that option at all because we're not going to worry about it. So we don't have to worry about that. But here's what we get back. We get back an object designated by these curly braces. And inside that object, there's a key of items, which is an array of, you guessed it, cart items. Right, these are all the items that exist in the cart. Excuse me. And we'll get back an object that represents each one of them. You can see there's an ID, which represents the product ID, the product name, product price, how many items we've added to the cart, right? So there's the quantity of how many we've got, and then a thumbnail image so we can display it on the cart page. So it looks like it's just, there's one property on this object of items. That property's value is an array of objects, and each one of those objects is a cart item with its respective properties, quantities, and things like that. Okay, makes sense so far? So let's call this endpoint, and let's get back some data. Oh, let me move this out of the way. And let's see, we're going to need to, now the first time we load the cart page, we want to get the cart, right? What do we need to pull in from React? To be able to do requests the first time the component mounts to the DOM. It's a function we need to pull out of React. That's it, use effects. Definitely want that. Oh, but we need more than use effect, right? We're going to grab stuff from the cart endpoint. We got to put it somewhere. We got to hold it in state. So we also need something else. State, you got it. So let's pull those in. Let's create a placeholder for our data. Get my notes back up. So here we're going to say const cart and set cart. This will be our piece of state that's going to hold the cart information after we call our endpoint. Use states. Now, I'm not, for the default value of state, we have to think about if there's nothing in the cart, we still want to be able to have the same logic for iterating over the items that are in the cart. But if we don't have anything in the cart yet, we need to give this thing a default value so that it doesn't throw an exception, right? So the shape of the cart is an object, right? So we have an object, right? So we'll give it a default object, but also it has a single property called items, which is an array. So in order to prevent exceptions from happening, we're going to say items with an empty array. This is going to be our default value for our cart before the endpoint returns anything. Because remember, if the endpoint doesn't return yet, this component is still going to try to render itself, right? And if we try to render null, we try to map over null to create rows, well, that's not going to work. So we want to give it a fail-safe to say, the same way we did the like props.items or empty array, remember that? This is basically, we're doing the same thing, except we're doing it when we're creating the variable that's going to hold the cart data. So if we don't yet have data back from our endpoint, this will be our default value in the meantime. Right, so at least we can iterate over something that's iterable. An empty array you can still call .map on all day long. It won't return anything, but you can at least call it. It won't error out. Okay, cool. So, well, technically it will return something. It'll return a new empty array. Just want to be explicitly clear on that. Map always returns an array, returns a new array. It just, if you iterate over an empty array, you get a new empty array. But that's also a useful piece of information for down the road. And years from now, you'll be like, oh, get it. And I'll leave that as a little like, hopefully you'll remember this moment type of thing. All right, little treasure box. Okay, cool. So now we need to call use effect. We'll give it a callback. And we want to do this when? First time it loads. Inside here, we'll want to make a call. So we need our Axios library. So let's pull that in. Axios from Axios. We're going to do a GET request. And the endpoint is /API/cart. So let's plug that in there. Oop, in quotes. And we don't need to send any parameters to it if we don't want to, but just to make it explicitly clear, we'll send a params object. We'll set test equal to false. In fact, what we could do is while we're developing this thing, we could set it to true. That way we don't have to worry about adding things to, because we can't add things to the cart yet, right? We don't have that mechanism put into place yet. So how are we going to be able to test this? How can we test adding things to the cart? We could just say test equals true at this point, now that I'm thinking about it. And then, yeah, then we'll have some test data at least. So we'll see the same data that exists on our homepage, but now we'll be able to iterate it over it and work on our page here. And that's probably why I actually put it in there now that I'm thinking about it, if I remember properly. And once we get our data back, we're going to do a .then because we get a promise. That promise gives us a response. And in that response, say const, let's say initial cart, because this is the initial cart as it exists on the first time we load the page. And that's going to be equal to response.data. So the data object that comes back, that's going to be our cart object. And then we'll say set cart, initial cart. So once we call this endpoint, actually, let's set this to true. I was talking about it, but never did it. We'll get back some example data from our endpoint. Then when we get it, we'll take that response.data object, which is basically the object with the items property on it, put that into this variable, and then we'll load that thing into the cart variable up here of the set cart. Everyone with me so far? Same pattern we've been doing all along. All right, cool. So we have data. Now we need to display it somewhere. Let's just first make sure we're actually getting it. So let's go down to where we would typically display this stuff. And let's put that pre-formatted tag in there again. Let's make sure we're getting stuff. JSON.stringify. We'll do our carts. We'll do our prettier formatting, or pretty printed formatting. Save that. Now, if we go to our cart page, here's our example data. Looks like we've got, well, there's another property called mock API is true. So, oh, I know I was sending that for the homepage specifically. That's okay. This is just test data. We don't care about the mock API property. What we care about is the items property and that it actually has data in it, or at least is an array of some sort. So here we have an array of 2 different products that are in the cart. We've got the transported away package and the waterfall retreat package. This one has a quantity of 1. Actually, they both have quantity of 1s. Okay, cool. So now that we have this data, we know we're getting it back. Now we can say, okay, great. Now we can actually map over this thing and create a row for each product. So let's do that. we'll get rid of our pre-tag. Put it in, oops, sorry, not a div. Because we need to return a bunch of rows, not just a single one. And what we'll do here, and this is gonna look, it's gonna get a little large, but we're gonna say cart.items.map. For each one of these things, we're gonna get an item. And we're gonna return some markup for that item. So the top level thing is going to be a div. The class name of, let's see, I'm calling it cart page, a double underscore line item row with a bootstrap class of row as well. And there's a couple more classes on here just for style's sake. So there's padding top of 3, padding bottom of 3, padding top on a medium-sized display of 4, and padding bottom on a medium-sized display of 5. A little bit more padding on desktop as compared to mobile. Cool. What else do we need to give this top level item that we're creating from an array? What special prop do we need here? Anyone remember? Key. Now, each one of these products has a unique ID. So we can definitely use that as a unique identifier for each one of these keys. And if we take a look at the endpoint wiki, each item has an ID property. So we can use that for our unique identifier since every product has its own unique ID. So we'll use that. So we'll inside our key, we'll say item.id. And inside here, well, now we can start filling out the different things, right? So we've got a bunch of different columns. So we'll say div. We've got a class name of col-md-5. And for mobile, it's going to be just display flex. So it looks like the way I figured it out with the CSS is we'll use Bootstrap's columns for the desktop display. So we'll have even spacing for each one. But for mobile displays, we'll just go with a regular flex box. So we'll have everything kind of configured around inside a flex box instead. Let's see. So cool. Like again, this is going to be quite a bit of markup, but it's good for illustrating how we're going to pull out each piece of data. So we'll add another div inside here. Class name is going to be equal to cart page double underscore line item name. I think you can guess what that's going to be, right? Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped. Line item thumbnail, right? Because the thumbnail actually comes before the name. Yeah, there's a lot of markups. I'm going to have to mark my spots here. Okay, cool. So inside here, we need to render a thumbnail. Anyone remember where we did that before? We had created a component for rendering images as thumbnails. It's in
product detail page.
It's, yeah, so inside the product detail page, we're using it. Well, technically we're using it inside the product detail page's image viewer. So what we want is the image media component that we created. Right, so this tells us, or this allows us to designate the image as a thumbnail or as a regular image. Right, so if I go over to shop, click on one of these, this element right here and all of these are all image media components. It's just these ones have the prop for is thumbnail. So we can reuse that on our cart page. Everything's reusable. Cool. So, oh yeah, image media. We have to pull it in though, right? We got to import that. Let's go to the top of our page. Let's import image media from, go up a folder, go into the image media folder, select out the image media JS file. And now we can call it right here. We definitely want this to be a thumbnail image, so we'll say is thumbnail. We want to pass that prop. Here's something that may not have been apparent, but if you pass a prop and you don't give it a value, it automatically assumes that the value of that prop is the value of true, like the Boolean true. It's kind of a shortcut. It's the same thing as saying this. So if React sees that you're passing in a prop and there's no value on it, it assumes it's a Boolean of true. So we can say is thumbnail. And then inside our image media files, we'll say is props.thumbnail true. Well, yes, it is, right? Otherwise, I'd have to say, I could say is thumbnail equals false. And now it'll evaluate that as false. Or the other way to do it is just not pass it at all. At which point that prop is now undefined, which is false. So these are little shortcuts for passing props. So I could just say is thumbnail. And I know that props.is thumbnail inside my image media component is going to be the value of true. Then, oh, here's another thing I want to talk about. So now let me open up image media and let's take a look at the props that it expects. You can see there's props.source, props.alt, style, and is thumbnail. Looks like we don't really care about the style at this point. But we do care about source and alt, right? Because we're getting that back from our API endpoint, right? So the thumbnail property on our item has two properties, source and alt. So we want to grab those. So now we can say, we could do it this way. Oops. We could say source equals item dot thumbnail. Not dot is thumbnail. Wrong auto complete. Item dot thumbnail dot source. Right, and that'll grab the source. And then alt item dot thumbnail dot alt. Oops, sorry. Gotta set it to the prop. I'm just going to save this real quick so it kind of auto formats it for us, just so we can see it a little clearer. But there's a quicker way to do this, right? There's a lot of redundancy here. I'm saying item.thumbnail.whatever, item.thumbnail.this, item.thumbnail.that, right? There's a quicker way we can take all of the properties of item.thumbnail and put them into this component. And the way this is going to work, and it's going to look a little funny at first, I'll take that out. I'm going to say curly braces, ... item.thumbnail. You've seen this syntax before? So this is the spread operator, right? So we're working with an object. We can spread those properties into, let's say, another object, right? Now, what is props in a component? It's an object, right? It's a props object. So if all the props that we assign on a component end up being keys on that props object, that means this, anything you put here, you're assigning values, property names to an object, right? It's props dot is thumbnail, props dot source, props dot alt, right? If we take all of the properties from item dot thumbnail and spread them into this image media like instantiation here, what we're really doing is we're saying, hey, image media props, you're going to get all of the properties from this object and its values spread into you, right? So now props will have is thumbnail, and it'll also have, oh, I refreshed the screen, 1 second. It's going to have, you know, is thumbnail prop, but it's also going to have source and alt props. Because we're spreading it as an, we're taking the object spread operator and we're spreading all the keys of the thumbnail object into the props object. Does that make sense? Anyone get that? Does anyone not get that? In case we make it just a little clearer, let me just go down here real quick. So we have image media, and there's, you know, let's just say this is the logical thing that React is doing. It's saying, oh, const props equals, you know, whatever I get from this right here. So it's gonna say, oh, I see there's an is thumbnail. I'm gonna put that in there. All you're doing is passing in the prop name, so I'm gonna assume it's the value of true. And it's gonna say, oh, you wanna take all the properties on the thumbnail object and you wanna plop them into here, cool. So it looks like you have source. It looks like you have alt. And it just so happens, and this is a shocker, it's not by accident, that the props available to image media are the same key names as the properties on the thumbnail object. Right, so this item.thumbnail has two properties, and we're taking those two properties and we're spreading them onto the props object. And because image media also expects a source and an alt prop, we're good to go. Make sense? I'm seeing more head nods, so that's good. Over time, you're going to recognize this pattern a lot. It's used all over the place, especially in React. Cool. So now we have our image media thumbnail. If we go back to, well, this is the finished app. Go back to our page here. Oh, look at that. We've got a row. We've got two different items in our cart, right? Now we're rendering these things, so that's cool. Let's see what it looks like on mobile. Yeah, pretty much the same thing, except those headings are gone. So that matches our design. So cool. So let's start adding some more stuff in here. Is everyone good on the image media and why we're? Okay, cool. Let's see. We've got after the div that holds image media. So it's the image media closing div. Excuse me. We're going to add another div. And eventually this one's going to hold our item name, class name. This is going to be on mobile. It's going to be a flex box. Looks like it's also going to be a flex box on desktop. Let's see, be slightly different. So flex-md-column. So on mobile, it's going to spread it this way. And on desktop, this column is going to go this way. We'll give it justify-content-md-between. So that's justify content on the column, which means it's going to be configured this way. there's going to be its equal amount of space between each element in that flex box. Equal space between all the items. So if there were 10 items, they'd have equal spacing between all of them if there were 10 items. I think we only have 2. But if there's only 2 items in a flex box and you have the justify content as, you know, between, it's going to push those 2 items to the very far limits of that box. So you'll have, so basically what you're doing is saying, hey, you know, no margin on either side, and make sure there's enough space between them. All right, so on there, we'll go inside, we'll create another div in here. This one is going to contain, so this class name equals cart page, double underscore, here's our line items, line item name, here's our actual name, and that is item.name. Right, we get that from our data. And then eventually, I'm going to put a placeholder here, another div. And I'm just going to say remove button. So if we look at the finished design for the excuse me, got like a hair in my throat or something. We've got, oh, we don't have any in the cart. Hold on. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a cat hair that's in my throat now, so that's fun. The joys of living with cats. We can see we have this remove thing down here. So we can actually remove things by adjusting the quantity or by clicking that button. Excuse me. Oh, I'm gonna have to get that out. We're gonna have to take a break soon. Let's get this cat hair out of here. So I'm just gonna put a placeholder there so that we can work on that at some point. But we're gonna continue with our markup. And where did okay, I did it in the same file. Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on. That'll just be our placeholder for now. And we're gonna go down. So 1, 2, 3 divs. So after this last div, excuse me. Make sure I got my indentation here correct. We've got our main div, which is actually this div. Make sure I'm at the right spot. All right, I think we'll have to take a break now. I gotta get this hair out of my throat. I'm just gonna be talking like, oh, look, there's a cat right there.
She won't leave me alone.
She heard someone was choking on a cat hair and she wanted to contribute to the cause. All right, so why don't we, let's take a break now. We'll take care of this cat hair, and then we'll come back at, let's say, 7:15. How's that sound for everyone?
That's fine. Would you mind pasting your code before you?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I will do that. Hopefully I won't be hacking while I do it. Oh, cats, I tell you, perfect timing. They always have perfect timing. Okay, so this is cartpage.js. All right, there we go. I'll see everyone back at 7:15. All right, 7:15. Let everyone, give everyone a minute to get back over to their computer. I think I've got the cat hair situation figured out. Cool. Let me just start up the screen share again. So we've got that. There's the chat. There's the screen. Okay. Okay, here we go. So we left off with this placeholder. And the only thing I didn't give it was the class names for that. What's for the div that actually contains the remove button once we eventually create that. And on mobile, we're going to do none, so d-none, and then desktop is d-md-flex. So they'll show up, it won't show up on mobile in this position, but on desktop it will. So we'll display that differently for mobile. Where did my, okay, so this one, let's add something again. So we can see here, excuse me, mobile, it's going to be kind of in line, it's going to be underneath this element here. And on desktop, it's to the right of it. So this is going to be another of those instances where we do a little bit of trickery where we have the same thing rendered in a different place, just with different containers that have different display conditional display classes assigned to them. So that, I think that was this, where did we do that? We did that on the search page, right? Is it the search page? I think so. I know we had done that already. Oh no, it was on the product detail page. Right, we rendered things differently based on whether or not it was displayed horizontal or mobile or desktop, and we just kind of use the same content in different places. So we'll do the same thing for that. All right, so now we should have, now my div structure should be correct, and it is, okay. So underneath this, above the last div, we're gonna add another one, more markup. It's funny, it's like we're in React, but it feels like we're just typing out a bunch of HTML most of the time, right? And we just have logic wrapped around that HTML. So that's what makes it so easy to transition from an HTML page over to a React component, because you literally can just copy and paste most of it. So for those that are converting their capstones from HTML over to React and JavaScript, it's going to be a pretty quick process, generally speaking. So you'll just have to figure out, you know, like how you're going to handle page transitions and things like that. But as far as getting the markup there, it's pretty quick. So this one, we're going to put a class name. This is going to hold the price. So this will be cart page, _, line item price. This is going to be another column on desktop. So col-md-2 and oops, d-flex. So mobile, it'll be a flex, like with all the other flex items on mobile. And we're going to add two more classes here. We're going to have justify -content -end. So that'll be for mobile. And on desktop, justify content -md -start. So on mobile, it's going to display the flex items to the right, and on the desktop, it'll show it on the left. So the start of the flex box will be on the left-hand side, the end of it being on the right-hand side. So 2 different ends there. Let's see what that looks like for the price. So on desktop, it's a column. And it's at the start, which means it's going to line up with the start of this column here. But on mobile, it's all the way over to the right. So that's that justified content end. So there's the difference there. All right, and then inside this div, make a new line so it's easier to see. We're going to need item.price. Now, remember, we created a utility for doing conversions to actually price tags. So let's pull that in. And remember where that was?
Utilities, right?
You got it. So this was import convert to price from, let's go up a directory. Are we there yet? Nope. Go up another one. There's our utils. And that's going to be in our prices file. Prices.js. So remember, we got to go up 2 folders, 2 directories. Come back down here. We'll wrap this in parentheses so we can call it with convert to price. Oops. Quick tip for you guys. If you need to put something in parentheses like this, you just do this again. Item.price. I don't have to go to the start, do this, and then to the end and do that. I can actually just highlight the whole thing and hit the open parens, and it'll wrap that for you. This is like a VS Code shortcut. The same thing exists for like curly braces and things like that. So let's say, for example, I put convert to price, right? And then I've got item.price, that name, price. I can wrap this whole thing in curly braces by selecting it and hitting the open curly brace. It'll wrap those curly braces around your entire selection. More VS Code shortcuts for you. Saves a lot on typing. And figuring out where you need to go. You just highlight what you want, hit the open curly brace or open parens. I don't know if it does it for.
I think it works with quotations too.
Well, it does it for like arrays or object property. Does it for quotes, single quotes, backticks, does it for backticks. So that's cool. So if there's a start and an end, like an open and closing tag, I think it'll probably work. In fact, let me do it doesn't do it for the angle brackets, unfortunately. But most of the others, you're set.
It does it for comments too. If you do command /.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you highlight the whole thing, command /. Now, this, of course, is the wrong type of comment, right? If you want comments in JSX, you have to evaluate it. And so you have to wrap the comment in curly braces and then do it inside there. And so if this was commented out, this would be /*/. So use the multi-line comment syntax for commenting things out in JSX. But we want that to show. We don't want that to be hidden.
For some reason, mine does it the right way. It even puts curly braces around it. I don't know why.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
That is cool because that never works for me.
Yeah, like, oh, you know what? I bet you if I highlight JSX and do it, no, it's not doing it. That's a bummer.
I don't know, but I was happy when I discovered that, because when you add the curly braces, there's just so many things to add around the outside. Yeah.
You know what's funny though? That did used to do that for me. I wonder what I changed. I changed some setting somewhere. All right. Cool. So we have our convert to price. That's awesome. Let's see how our page is looking. We've got this stuff here. Mobile's looking good. All right, so we're getting there. Excellent, excellent. Let me get back to my place. Okay. Convert to price. So after this div that contains the convert to price, we're going down, we're going to create another div. And this is going to eventually create our quantity component. We'll give this a class name of col-md-3. So desktop will have a column of 3 units. Mobile will be d-flex, another flexbox property. Justify-content -between. So for mobile, we'll have equal spacing in here of the elements. Padding top of 2 and padding bottom of 2 as well. All right, so the next thing we're going to have is another instance of our remove. We'll just say remove button. All right, we're going to have another instance of it here. So for mobile, we'll have it in this spot. So in order for it to show up on mobile, but not desktop, we want to do d-md-none. So on a desktop display, do not display this thing. If I come up here and look at my remove button up here, on mobile, don't display this. But if I only give it d-none, it's going to do, don't show it at all for anything, right? Or I say, hey, but when you get to the medium display and up, show it as flex. So right here, we're going to show it on mobile because we haven't told it not to. But on, excuse me, on a desktop display, we want to say, nope, don't show this particular one. All right, cool. So that's that. After the remove button, we're going to create another div. And now we're going to, that's just going to be a kind of like a wrapper div here. And inside here, we want our product quantity component, right? The same thing that we used on our product detail page. So if I go down to product detail page, you see we have this product quantity component that we're using, this reusable component. Let's go up to here and you can grab this and copy this because that's our import statement. If you want to save some typing. On product detail page JS, just grab the import statement for product quantity. Head back to cart page. And at the top, just paste that in underneath your import statements there. Now we can do that because product detail page and cart page are both at the same depth relative to product quantity. They both have to go up one folder and then back down again. This would not work if the nesting was completely at different depths inside the folder tree. So just as a heads up, you can't just copy and paste any import statement. You have to look at the relative path to where it's at. And don't worry, the next time React tries to, or when the development server tries to compile everything, they'll say, hey, I can't find this file. That's how you know if that's the last thing you did. You might want to check at the relative path that you've got defined there. All right, so we're going to say product quantity. And this takes a bunch of stuff, a bunch of props that we have. So let's go look at our product quantity component. We get a refresher on this. We have prop set quantity, right? So to display the value between the two buttons, handle increase, handle decrease, And in case we want to hide the label, we can do that. Now, in this case, we do, because that label that says quantity, well, we already have a header at the top of the column that says quantity. So we don't need the label that's associated with the component. We can hide that. And luckily we thought ahead of time, and we created a prop that'll handle that for us. So this was kind of like an exercise in thinking about all the use cases of a particular component and allowing like little escape hatches via props to be able to handle different situations. All right, so, oh, sorry, we're on this component here. So we've got, let's apply the hide label. So hide label. Now again, if we don't pass the value, it assumes it's going to be the Boolean of true. So we're good there. In fact, I'm going to make this a multi-line thing because eventually it will be. Because it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of stuff in here. The next thing we want is the quantity. And we get that from item.quantity, right? Because after we're iterating over every item here. Right, so here's we're mapping over every item. So we have access to the quantity property on that item. So that'll work for that. And then there's also handle increase, which is going to be a function. So for now, we'll just do this just to get something in there. And then also handle decrease. Again, it's going to be a function. Now, we don't have the logic in place yet. Like we're not adding or subtracting things from the cart via those endpoints yet. So we're going to keep this as a placeholder for now. And we're going to come back to that. Let's just finish the markup. So at least we can see everything on the page. Let's see. We'll finish up the markup for each of the rows. And then after that, I think would be a good time to start looking at the endpoint for adding and removing things. Because there's a bunch of markup at the end of the component here that's going to show the subtotal. It's going to show a button where eventually you'll go to the checkout process and things like that. And there's really not a lot there as far as like new stuff, right? So I think what I'll do is I'll just it's just a bunch of markup. So I can just copy and paste that into the chat if you want to grab that, rather than us sitting here typing out all the myriad of classes that are in this thing at the bottom. It's just more iteration of what we've been doing. The reason I've gone this far with not copying and pasting this stuff is because of the fact that we have very specific logic we're going to have to put in here. And so I just want to show you that stuff. But the very bottom of the page is literally just a bunch of markup with a reference to the length of the items array and like the cart total itself. So yeah, so it's just a lot of stuff that we don't need to sit here and type out. So for now, we'll just finish out iterating over each of these rows, and then we'll go into start adding these, calling the correct endpoints for adding and subtracting things. Let me make sure I'm at the right level of div. So I've got this one here, right? So after this, so before the last div, we're going to create one more div. I'm going to do class name equals cart page _, line item price. Now, if you notice, we already have a line item price. That's interesting. Why would I repeat that here? Let's find out. So I think what we can do Is it the same long classes as well? It is. Okay, so cool. So let's come up here and let's copy this whole thing for cart line item price. We'll just double check, make sure there's nothing. Yep. And we're going to come down here. We're going to replace this whole div with what we just copied. But I'm going to do one thing different. If we look at, oh, this is the working one. Here's the finished one. Why would we want to do that? Well, there's only one difference between this column and this column, right? Heading. But there's a little bit different logic. So as I add things to the cart, we just have to calculate the total for that line, right? So, and that's pretty simple. All we need to do is say, instead of just item.price, we'll say item.quantity times item.price, and that'll get us the total for that line. Other than that, it's exactly the same column, other than the heading. So there's no sense in typing all that stuff out. We'll just make one little change and we're good to go. And the line item price is really just formatting where this is in regards to, like, you know, making sure it's lined up with everything else in the columns. So cool. So there's reusability here, but because this is different, that's why we just simply copied it. Right? It would be different if this was a completely different component that handles all these different things. We don't need to create a separate component just for two divs that are columns. Like, that seems to be overkill. You could, but it would make more sense if, let's say, there were 3 or more columns that displayed the exact same thing other than one thing, right? Then you'd want to create another component and pass in a prop to convert the price, right? So let's say there were 10 different price columns on this thing to show different states of discounts and savings and all the things that Caitlin's been having fun with over there. Yeah, so if you're going to repeat things more than twice, you might want to look into creating a component for it. Right, so that's just kind of a takeaway there. I'm only doing it in 2 places, so there's no real need, seems to be. I would say the logic that's within these 2 pieces of markup is so simple that it doesn't really make sense, right, to create a component. If there was a lot of complex logic in here, or if we need to make calls to endpoints or things like that, then I'd probably want to create a component for that. I don't want to repeat all these too many things that are complex. All right, cool. So if I look at, oh, this is the finished one. If I look over here, did I save this? I didn't save it. Save. Oops. Too many things on the screen. Let me move that. Move that over. There we go. Cool. These don't really line up, so I think I missed a style there somewhere. But that's okay. For now, we'll just keep going. This does line up, so yeah. I'll look into that later. But here we've got this. Now, this doesn't do anything yet, so we have to wire that up so we can actually see the change happen here. And if we were to deplete that quantity down to 0, we want to remove it. So let's figure that logic out. For that, we're going to need to look at our endpoints again. So let's look at our wiki. How can we change things in the cart? All we're doing right now is we're just getting stuff. Lucky for us, there are endpoints in place that we can add things to the cart and remove things from the cart. So what do we need to do to add something? And if you remember, calling any cart endpoint will always return a copy of that newly updated cart. So something to keep in mind as we work this out. So we need to send the product ID and the user selected quantity to the endpoint. Okay, cool. That's pretty easy. For removing, send the product ID and the quantity that we'll be removing. Okay, that seems good as well. Also, if we send along the remove all parameter set to true, like this, it will remove that product from the cart and its quantity completely. So that would come in handy for this remove button that we've got here, right? But if for the quantity thing, we only need to add one or subtract one. So for that, we'll just say, all right, we'll send in the ID and we'll send in a quantity of 1 for adding and removing. Now that's going to be a little bit different on our product detail page. Remember, because you can change how much quantity, and then when you click the add to cart button, you should be able to add that much quantity, right? So that's why this is defined as a value here. We just want to add 1 at a time. Like that doesn't make sense on a product detail page, right? Select how many, then click add to cart. So that's where that will come into play later. But for now, let's just add and subtract 1 at a time. And we don't need to worry about the remove button just yet. We'll get to that later. For now, we'll just add 1 or subtract 1. And the backend should know that if you're subtracting 1 and there's a quantity of 1, it'll just remove it for us. Like that logic's already in place. And I think I even put a little thing in here. Yeah, so if the item's current quantity will drop to or below 0, then remove the given item entry completely from the cart items list. That's for the backend implementation. So if you're working on the backend portion of this, that's the logic you would have to put into place so that your front-end developers don't need to worry about handling if it's at 0 or not. That should be on the backend anyway. All right, cool. So we need to call, let's start by adding stuff to the cart. So we'll copy this API/cart add. Now, let me just keep this over here for now because we are going to need to take a look at what we need to send. So for handle increase, let's go into the body of that function. And for handling the increase, what do we need to do? We need to call an endpoint. So we need to use Axios. So Axios dot, and then we're going to say put, as if you remember, this is a put, like not a get. So we need to use the right operation for this. And the difference between a get and a put is that a get simply just gets the stuff, right? It's just expecting to retrieve things. A put says to the backend, it says, hey, I see this new data coming in. And I think we need to modify something that already exists, right? So if you're adding something to the cart and it is already there, we should be adding to the quantity of that thing. So put makes sense with it. Okay, so, and did you guys go over those different operations with Ryan's thing? So he explained all this stuff, so that should feel familiar. Cool. So Axios.put, we give it our endpoint, and then we need to pass along our parameters object. Now, this is a little bit different from the get. So if you remember, when we get stuff, we give it an object, and that object contains something that has a key called params. That's how the get works, because get expects that you're just going to call an endpoint and you're just going to get back whatever it does by default. You have to explicitly say, no, I need to pass some other stuff in, right? That tells Axios to say, oh, okay, so you actually want to do a little bit more than just call the endpoint. Okay, that's cool. So, and that's just an Axios library thing that you'd have to get used to if you use it. But if we're putting stuff, we just pass in the changes that we want to see. So we're going to pass in an object. Remember, it takes an ID and a quantity. So the ID is going to be item.id, right? The current item. Quantity will be 1. I'm only going to add 1 at a time with this particular logic here. You may think, oh, great, that's easy. That's cool. But wait, we have to update the state of our front end based on what we just did on the back end, right? And so that's where this every cart endpoint returns the cart comes in handy. So now we can say, okay, well, after that happens, then we're going to get a response back. We'll take our response, create a new callback here. And we're going to say const updated cart equals response.data. That data object is our cart, just like it was when we did the get. And now all we have to do is set cart to the updated cart. I'll leave that on the screen there for you. So we're calling this thing, we're passing in this object, which represents all the properties that we need to pass the endpoint because that's what it's expecting. So we give it our item ID, quantity of 1, get back a response, which is the cart, newly updated cart. And then all we're doing is we're just accessing that off the response.data object or key, and then updating the cart. So if we look at, we're doing the same thing here. The only difference is that we're just calling this variable initial cart. We're calling this one updated cart. But essentially, it's just a variable that holds our cart data. We could technically do response.data right here. And that's going to do the same thing. But to a developer that hasn't worked on your project before, right? They would come in and say, oh, that's what that is. Like, I don't know what response.data is if I've never used it before and I haven't looked at all the documentation, but I can clearly see that whatever's coming out of here, this variable name tells me what it is. So this is where naming is kind of important. And it gives context to what you're doing to developers, either future you or other people on the team. As hard as naming can be, it's extremely important. Okay, cool. So we can do basically the same thing for this one, right? We're just removing one. So let's make it easy on ourselves. Let's copy this entire Axios statement, paste it in there, except we need to change a couple things, right? We need to change, well, one thing really, right? Because this takes ID and quantity just like the other one. We're not going to pass this in because we don't want to remove everything. We want the backend to handle it for us. All we need to do is change which endpoint we're calling. So we could just say cart-remove from this ID, right? And this amount of quantity we're removing. There we go, we did it. So we didn't have to type all that out. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the question. Why don't we want to display the remove button on desktop or mobile, depending? It depends on the design and the mockups that you're going off of. So it was easier to not display on mobile versus display on desktop in certain situations based on the mockups that were there. Because sometimes you'll look at different, you'll look at a mockup and over time you'll get used to like the different types of CSS classes you can apply to it, the structure of the markup. And it just seemed to be a lot more complicated, like style-wise, to pull off the design to pull off a responsive design based on the mockups versus just creating 2 instances of that element and just giving them 2 different classes. So that's basically what it came down to. I was kind of scratching my head for a little bit on how to best handle that, and this is the easiest solution I could come up with that made sense. Oh, cool. Excellent. Okay, sweet. So now let's test it out. Let's see if this actually works. I'm going to go to, well, not the completed one, but this one. Plus, Well, something happened though. Let's add something new to the cart. Oh, I can't do that yet because why? We haven't wired that up yet. And there's another reason why this didn't work. So I just remembered. So here we've got some test data, right? This is test data. What if I add something to the test data? Well, okay. But all my other test data is gone. That seems to be working. Here's what's going on here. So when we call initially, we're saying, okay, give me back test data, right? That's what I want you to give me back. It says, okay, that's cool. I'll give you some test data. Then it gives me back a cart that represents what the state of my cart would look like should there be data inside of it. But what the test option does not do, it does not save that test data in the actual cart on the back end. All I'm doing is serving up some test data so you can look at the shape of the data. That's really all it's doing, so you can develop your visual stuff. What it doesn't do is save that data in the cart. So what's happening here is, hey, let me just refresh this page. I've got this data. I'm going to add one of these. That's all I see now. What happened was this endpoint's working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. But since there was no actual cart, like the actual cart data on the back end, it was empty. So it said, oh, you're adding one? Cool. I'll add the entry. There you go. Now you've got one. I'll give you back the state of the cart, which is a cart with one item in it. Because there was no actual cart object on our backend yet. All we were doing is grabbing test data from a different parameter in the endpoint. So that's all that's really happening here. It's kind of hard to explain this without going into the inner workings of the mock API. But we could see clearly this is working. Remove is working. And if I go down to 0, we've got an empty cart. So we know the endpoint's doing what's supposed to. We're getting back the cart data properly. We're updating it properly on the screen. Now all we have to do is, well, now we got to wire up the product detail page so we can actually add stuff properly instead of listening for test data and working off of that. So if we go back to, and this is one thing I want to point out, because depending on the APIs that you work with, there may be situations where you just need test data, or maybe there's completely different test API endpoints that you'll be hitting. But for here, it says you can pass the optional test param set to true. This is for UI development purposes only and will not work well combined with real user interactions, which we just saw, right? So there was a disclaimer in here. So if you're seeing something weird happening, and this is not just for this app, but if you're seeing something weird happening and you're following the instructions, you think you're following them properly, reread the documentation for whatever thing you're trying to access, whether it's an API endpoint or working with a component. Make sure you understand that there may be some parameters or props or things that are only there for a very specific purpose. So this is just kind of like, I just wanted to demonstrate this kind of like this weirdness, like, well, what's going on here? Why isn't this? We just need to look at the documentation to say, oh, I shouldn't be using test for actual, user interaction purposes, right? It was just so I could build out the UI. Does that make sense? The lesson of the day is read the docs. So chances are your answer will lie right in there, as long as they're created nicely or well enough. Okay, cool. So now we have, this is working. That's awesome. While we're still on the cart page, let's try doing this remove all. Let's wire that up. And then we'll add stuff to the product detail page. And that'll finish out the rest of our day after that. All right, cool. So all we have to do is call the same endpoint. We don't have to worry about removing stuff from the product detail page. You don't remove things from the cart on a product detail page. You only add them there. Otherwise, that would be a really weird user experience. Someone's car alarm's going off out there. Okay, so all we need is our cart add call to work for us now. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's for the product detail page. Sorry. Cart remove. That's all we need to work with for removing everything. And we're going to pass along the remove all param set to true for that one. So what do we have? We have this. We have some placeholders here. Close that file out. We don't need that open. Where were they? Here's the remove button here. Oh, here's the other one over here. Okay. So now because this is actually calling an endpoint, there's some logic in here. We don't want to repeat ourselves the same way we're just repeating the wrapper or repeating this thing. Like this is simple logic. But we'll want to create a separate component for this because it contains more complex logic. It really makes sense to do it this way. Even though there's only 2 of them, we don't want to write out the same thing over and over again. Like these are technically different, so this is fine. But these are going to be identical. So we'll create a new component for that. And we're going to do it in the same file. This is the only place it's going to be used. And depending on the coding style guides of where you're working or what projects you're working on, this may be allowed, this may not be allowed. This particular thing wouldn't fly where I work currently, but it may fly in other places. So I'm just going to do it in the same file just to show you that you actually can create more than one component in a file. But there's going to be one key difference. And the key difference is we're not going to export it. So there's no other way that any other component could actually utilize it. This is the only place it's going to be used, period. So we'll just say const without the export statement. We'll call this a remove button. That's going to take props. We're going to return some markup. Oh, nope, we're going to return, sorry, not a div. We're going to return a button. And that's just going to say remove. And now we can add. Oops, sorry. Add some props here. The first thing we're going to add is an on click. Let's handle that. All right, so that's going to be a function. And what we can do is we can copy some of this logic because we are using the same endpoint as the product quantity handle decrease function is doing. So let's go grab that. We'll grab the Axios statement for the cart remove endpoint. That's going to be a little different. Paste it in there. And we're not going to remove quantity of 1. We're going to do remove all of true. So it's going to remove everything. And then we're also going to get, yeah, we're going to have to do something about this too. This is going to be slightly different as well. So because this component lives outside of the other one, specifically outside of that, cart.items.map, right? It doesn't live in there, right? It lives outside of here. So we can't just say item.id or set cart. Like these things, we don't have access to those things anymore. So how do you think we can get those things into this component? Any answers on that? How can we get the item being iterated over? How can we get its ID? And how can we get access to the cart page's set cart function inside here? How do we get them into here? Let's see what this is saying. Index? No, not index. map. Well, if we're working inside the map, but specifically what we want to do is, because this is a component, this may make it a little bit easier. If I just come down here and I say, oh, here's my remove button component, right? How do I pass stuff into this thing? What do I have to define on this component? Props, you got it. All right, sweet. Excellent. We need to pass props in. How else are we going to get stuff in there, right? Because this, like I said, this is not defined here. This is just where we're instantiating it, where we're creating a copy of that particular component. This is where our data lives for the item. And up here, I went too far. Up here is the function that it updates the quantity. Or I'm sorry, updates the cart. So we pass props down it. So what we can do is, let's pass in, let's see, what props did I define on this thing? Where did I put it? Okay. Okay, I'm defining 2 props. Let's go back up to the top to our remove button. Instead of item.id, why don't we just pass it in as a prop? So props.id. So we'll pass in the item.id to the remove button. So now that's a prop. And now for this here, we can remember, what are all the things that we can pass in as a value to props? We've got strings, booleans, we can pass arrays, we can pass objects, we can pass numbers. We can also pass functions. Functions are values in JavaScript, just like anything else. You can pass them around just like anything else. Exactly, you got it. And we're only doing that for remove button. Not sure passing props like that. Oh yeah, so for the remove button, it's accepting a prop. One of them is going to be ID, the other one's going to be a function. But yeah, so that's what we're doing. So instead of set cart, we're going to need to come up with a prop name for that. Now, props.setCart doesn't make sense to me because I'm not really in the let's just pretend for a moment that this remove button is used for other things than removing carts or items from carts, right? Let's just forget the fact that it's calling this explicitly. This response .then represents a successful response coming back. So, and you're going to see this a lot with naming things, right? So for me, what I would first go to would be, I want to have a prop called handle success. So on the success of whatever I'm doing, this is the thing I want you to call. So prop.handle success. And you're going to see that sort of naming convention a lot in like code bases that are out there, especially when it comes to like API endpoints. You want to handle the success of something, or if there was an error, say handle error, right? So naming things appropriately in the context of where they're defined or where they're being used kind of makes sense. Does that make sense? Like I could technically call it props.setCart. Right? I could do that. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that you're going to see naming conventions like this, right? So you're going to handle a successful, GET request or response from an endpoint or something like that. So, and then this props.handle success function, whenever it gets called, it's going to be handed the new updated cart. Update cart, yes. So updated cart comes back from our response. This is still the same. And then we pass it here. So this is going to make a little bit more sense once we actually add these props to the different areas down below. So here, I think we're good with this. Yep, we're handling props.id, remove all is true. And then we're expecting a function on the props.handle success key there. So let's go back down to remove button. We can pass in our ID equals item.id, right? And handle success is going to be our set cart function. So now I can just say copy, paste it over this one. Now they both have access to the same data, so they're going to be identical there, right? And they both have access to item.id in the same context, and they both have access to set cart. So as soon as our response comes back, props.handle success, which is our set cart function, is going to be called, and it's going to be handed the new updated cart. So it's the same as if we were still inside the map, we would say set cart, updated cart, right? That's the exact same thing that's happening here, except that function is now coming down as a prop because this remove button is not defined within the cart page mapping that's going on. Does that make sense? Sort of, maybe. All right, let's test it out. Now, of course, we are still grabbing a test data. So which one is, oh, this is the, all right, so we've got this remove button here, which we need to, there's one more thing we need to do to fix that. But if I click, now, got a whole bunch of stuff, got 18 of these, I want to remove them all. If I click this, okay, cool. Our endpoint is doing what it says it's going to do. We get back our updated cart, which is now empty, and our UI is updated properly. So let's go ahead and let's fix the look and feel of this, which is really just a class that we need to apply. Let's go back to our remove button, and we'll add a new prop here. Class name equals, and what did I do for that? Oh, he's cart page, double underscore, remove button. There's already class defined for us there. That looks a lot better than that ugly old button there. All right, so before I copy and paste this into the chat, for those that need to catch up there, let's go back down to here to our get. And we're done working with our test data. Now we actually want to add stuff the right way. So we're going to set test, instead of test true, we're going to say test false. So we're not grabbing test data. So if I refresh my cart page, it is empty, no matter how many times I refresh it, because now we're actually getting the real cart object, which doesn't have anything on it yet. And I'm going to copy and paste this into chat. Oh, one other thing before I do that, let me just put the markup in for that last section. I'll paste that. So I'll show you, I'll paste this in, you're gonna see how much markup this was. It's like, holy cow, like when do we really want to sit there and type out all those classes if it's just a bunch of markup, right? There is one other thing here, this cart total. I do have to account for that. Where is that? Oh, actually, that's a fun little thing that I want to show you. Let me just leave this as cart. I'll just say cart total as a placeholder, and we'll write this part together. So let me refresh this. Oh, that's right, because there's nothing there. Real quick, let me grab some test data to make sure this is going to render properly. Okay, cool. So this is all the stuff that it was doing down here. This whole checkout button thing. Right, okay, cool. All right, let's do this. Let me set this back to false. I'll highlight everything, copy all of that, and I will paste that into chat. So this is the cartpage.js updated with remove button. All right, so if you want to grab the code out of the chat and paste that in, we can work on that cart total thing real quick together. Adding stuff to the cart from the product detail page will be pretty quick. We just need to call the endpoint and adjust how we're handling the quantity. So I'm confident we'll be able to get that done in time. But for the cart total, we're gonna, actually what I'll do is I'll keep the test data as true, just so we can see this happening. Right now there's, what is this? Let me refresh that. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Scratch what I just told you to do. I pasted, I think I pasted this in the wrong spot. I pasted it inside the map. I didn't want to paste that inside the map. Yeah, we don't want it there. We want it. That's why it's doing that. We don't want a checkout button for every single row. That doesn't make sense at all. We want this just outside of here. My bad, folks. Hopefully, here we go. That's a heck of a lot better. Also, it's displaying it properly over here. That should have been my first clue. Cool. So let me let me copy and paste that in. Corrected cart page.js. Sorry. Goes to show you that senior level developers make mistakes. We do it every day. We just don't tell everyone that we do it. The only reason you know is because you saw it happen. All right. Cool. So excellent. So I'll give you guys a second to grab that. Pull that in. And then when you refresh your page, you should be able to see this here. Give me a thumbs up when you're there.
Where exactly did you paste that in? I just want to take your, like, I want to keep the rest of
Yeah,
my
so that's in the student pasted code chat.
Right. I just mean, where did you put it in my code?
Oh,
I'm just going to take a portion of it.
oh, cartpage.js.
Right. Never mind. I'll figure it out.
Oh, you mean that last part?
Yeah, if I put them side by side, I can compare it line by line. I'll be all right.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I pasted that new row of all that giant markup after the closing curly brace of our map statement. If that helps. Yeah, so to Jahil's comment there, relying on an API endpoint to handle that stuff for you simplifies a lot of this, right? So updating data in your database, you really shouldn't be updating data on the front end. Like, that's not what the front end is for. It's for displaying things. It gets infinitely more complex if you handle everything on the front end. There's a whole concept of separation of concerns, right? So the front end is concerned with displaying data visually to a user and allowing that user to interact with it. But all of the actual updating goes on the back end behind the scenes, right? We don't want to do that on the front end. You may, yes, it's less messy, exactly.
I feel like we had this conversation earlier.
Yeah. So I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Yeah, so updating data should happen on the back end. Now you may kind of massage what that data update looks like before you send it back. Like you need to maybe send back a specific object that the endpoint's expecting. But the actual handling of the updating should be happening on the back end. We shouldn't be doing any of that on the front end at all. So there's that as well. Now you're going to hear about down the road, you're going to hear about applications that are called progressive web applications or progressive web apps, PWAs. And you can store data in the browser in something called IndexedDB. It's just like a small little database that lives inside the browser. And you can update your database, quote unquote, on the front end. But even so, that code should live in a separate file that should be considered the backend, right? You don't actually update that data in the database, in that index database on your front end portion. You're doing it separately. So it may feel like, yeah, it's kind of front end because it's happening in the browser. There are instances of that, but there's still that separation where what the user sees and interacts with is not the same code that's actually doing the updating. So that's kind of what I want to get to. Cool, awesome. So let us do the cart total thing. So essentially what we need to do is we need to grab each one of these totals together and add them all together. So if there's more than one quantity, we want to make sure that we account for that. And then we have to account for every single row. So how do we do that? Well, we come up here, let me get back to my notes. We're going to define a function. Or we're going to find a variable, really. After our use effect, I'm just going to put a comment in here real quick. This is what we're going to be doing. We're going to use JavaScript's reduce function, also relevant to a conversation earlier today. It's literally like, couldn't have been more perfect. We're going to say const cart total equals, and now we have to think about our data, right? So the reduce function that we're going to be using only exists for arrays natively. I wrote a library that allows you to do it on objects, but natively speaking, we can only reduce arrays. So what's the array that we need? Well, we need cart, right? Because here's our cart dot items. Okay. Now we say reduce. Do you guys go over? I forget. Did you guys go over reduce? Someone saying yes. Someone saying no. Okay. So what reduce does is kind of what the name implies. You give it an array of things, and your return value out of that are those items reduced down to a single thing. And you do that via the algorithm that you pass to it, any sort of computational thing you want to do. So let's say, for example, like here, we have an array of items, cart items, and all of those items have a price and a quantity associated with it. So as we're going over every item, because reduce iterates over every item, as we do that, we're going to be building up a value based on price and quantity. And we're going to accumulate all of those things together into a single value, which will eventually be a number that represents our cart total. So that's what we're going to do. Now, reduce takes, let's see. Yeah, we've got, you can actually see right back here, the callback. It takes a callback, just like .map or .filter, right? .reduce takes a callback, and the parameters available to us is the previous value. We'll get to that in a second. The current value, the current index, and the original array, which we're not going to worry about. We're only going to worry about the first two parameters that we pass it. And I'm just going to type in, I'm going to type in total and next item. And then I'm going to have, that's going to go to a function. Let me explain what's happening here. So let's see. Can I get that thing to show back up? All right. They were saying like the previous item. What that really means is the previous accumulated value based on how far you've gone through the array right now. So let's say I have an array of 3 numbers. At the first number, the previous item is going to be the first number in that array by default. So let's say it's numbers 1, 2, and 3, and eventually I want to add all these things together. Next item represents the next thing that's going to be iterated over. Like it's technically the next item I'm currently iterating over. So it's going to say, okay, well, the next item's 2. Now I need to return my newest accumulated value based on what I have access to, which was the previous item. In this case, it would be my total that I'm accumulating. The next item, which is the next number. So I return total plus the next item, I should get my new total. So the next time it iterates over the next item, my total, in this case, if they were 1, 2, 3, my total at this point would be 3. My next item's 3. If I return total plus next item, I get 6, right? So it's going to keep accumulating this value. Now, in our case, it's a little bit different. We're not just working with numbers. We're iterating over objects. So we can't just say total plus next item. It doesn't work. Like 0 plus an object, that's not a thing, right? Now, reduce takes 2 parameters. I know I just said it takes all these things, but that was the callback. The first parameter to reduce is a callback, just like map and func and filter. That callback has some parameters, but that whole function is the first parameter to reduce. The second parameter is a default value that you want to give it to start with, which is, in our case, it's going to be 0. We're going to start with a value of 0, because if we're summing up totals, we should always start at 0. Otherwise, this could be a really confusing user experience. And so now we get to iterate over every one of these things. And the first time we iterate over the first object, our total is now going to be equal to 0, because we define that as the second argument to reduce. Okay, so this is equal 0. Next item, let's go into this. Let's see, we're going to return. Let's just make this easier to look at to start with. So we'll say const. We'll say, no, we can just one line it. It's actually pretty simple. So we're going to return the next item dot price times the next item dot quantity, right? Because we're doing that for our little subtotal for each line, right? So if we return that, that's cool, but we also need to add that to our accumulated total plus total. This is our entire reduce function. So what we return is the next accumulated total for the next iteration over the array. So on the first item, let's say we have 2 items. We have this package, which has a price of 600. We have this package with a price of 1400. Each have 1 quantity. So let's go through that. So the first time reduce is called on this array. Our total is 0 by default. We're saying, hey, start at 0. And for the first item, which is quote unquote next item, the first item is our transported away, which has a price of 600. So we say 600 times 1, because that's the quantity, is 600 plus 0, 600. So now the next time it looks at the next item in the array, which is our waterfall retreat item, total is going to be equal to 600 because that was the previous calculation. So now this item here, the next item up for grabs is our waterfall retreat, which has the quantity of 1400, price of 1400, quantity of 1, 14 times 1 is 1400, plus total, which is 600. Our total is now 2000. And so we're just summing up all these different values. Does this make sense? Reduce is really powerful, and it can be used for far more than returning just a regular number. Like this could be, we could be returning and accumulating an entire object full of all different types of things. We can reduce over any array we want and return any type of value that we want. So it's pretty powerful. The only thing with reduce that is can be less appealing is the fact that because it's so powerful, it can get really complex and really hard to read. Right. So when you're looking at this for the first time and you've never seen reduce, you're like, what? What is this? Right. Whereas we could say, I could for each over something. Right. And then update a value and do all those things. But this actually makes more sense in how this component is set up, because we have access to the cart items right here. We could use a use effect to like update a bunch of stuff and then update another piece of state, like add another use state thing in here. But now it starts to get complex just for readability's sake, right? So this little kind of almost one-liner makes a whole lot of sense. It's powerful. It does exactly what we need it to do. It's concise. And it fits the model that we've got, where we've got access to this. All we need now is to update. This is going to update every time this component re-renders. So we don't have to worry about calling any functions, anything, right? It's going to, every time this renders, it's going to say, oh, cart total is equal to whatever the state of the cart is, you know, times all these different things. Anytime a response comes back with a new cart, this will get updated, which will automatically re-render our component, which will automatically assign this the new value based on the cart items. So let's take cart total, go down to our placeholder here, plop it in. So now when I look at my page, I see 2000. Oh, but we didn't convert it to a price tag. Let's do that. Oops, didn't want to do that. Convert to price. Much better. So now I can actually start updating this, right? Well, of course, we're still using test data. As you can see, my total's updating along with it. Right. 30 people are going to be transported away at the low, low price of $18,000. All right, so cool. Does that make sense to everyone, what we just did there? I'm seeing head nods. Cool, excellent, yep. So let's go up to here. I'm going to set this to false. I'm going to copy and paste this. Now, cart page at this point is complete. We're done. We're not going to be adding the whole checkout process into here. It's essentially the same, kind of the same thing as what we've been doing all along, right? It's another page with another route. You're going to do a different thing on that page. You're going to show in the checkout process, you're going to have to create a form for, accepting payments and things like that, right? It's just another form. And with that, you're going to want to create a new endpoint, right, to accept the data coming from your user, to make calls out to whatever authentication things for handling credit cards, or whatever you're going to be doing eventually, right? So there's that, and then you have to process the actual order that should be updated in the database, send out your delivery folks, send it out over the mail, things like that. Oh, okay, so you're answering there, cool. All right, oh, let me paste this in, sorry. Cart page.js final. I hope it's final. I don't think there's anything else we need to do there. Didn't actually. Oh, I didn't actually hit Command C. That's why. There we go. Much better. All right. Wonder why I pasted blank. Okay, last thing up for grabs today is the product detail page. So we'll head over there. I'm sorry, that's not product detail page, that's product quantity. Okay, so we need to add stuff to the cart. You would be kind of amazed how quick this whole process is here. So product detail page, get my notes. All right, so essentially what we're going to be doing is on our product detail page JS, we're going to add an on-click handler. And we're going to multi-line this thing because otherwise it's going to look really, really long. In fact, I'm going to put this after class name. And so we've got a function for our click handler. Now, all we have to do is call Axios. We need to pass it the item ID, or call Axios for the cart add endpoint, pass it an ID, pass it a quantity. And that's basically it. So are we using Axios? We are. Excellent. So now we can say Axios dot put. This will be our API / cart. The object it takes has an ID property. Where can we get that ID from? Well, on this particular page, we have access to the current item. This is almost a copy paste from the other page. So we could say item.id, quantity. Now, this is not just one. This is however many times the user has clicked that product quantity updater, right? So if we scroll up to the top, this quantity variable represents how many items we want to add to the cart based on how many times the user clicked plus or minus. So quantity is quantity. And again, because of syntax and the same key versus variable name, we can just say quantity. Then we get back a response. But we're not going to do anything with that response per se, right? Because we're not going to update the cart on this page because we're not on a cart page anymore, right? So we can do something else. And I'm going to put this commented out. I'm going to say show toast. We're going to get to this tomorrow. But essentially, that's that little pop-up that shows up, that little quote unquote toast that pops up that says, hey, you added something to the cart. So I'm just going to say added to cart. And I'll just leave it as a commented out type of thing. And with that, now we can add stuff to the cart. That's it. All we have to do is call the endpoint, pass it the ID and the quantity, and the backend is going to say, "Hey, cool! I'm going to update your cart for you." Let's go give that a test run. I'm going to go to shop. I go back to the cart page. I still have stuff in my cart, so let me remove that. I'm not using test data anymore, right? So I've got an empty cart. So I'll go over to shop. We'll go to urban excursion. Sure. We'll add it to the cart. Now, normally, when we're done, we'll see a toast pop up. So let's go to the cart and see if it actually worked. It did not, because why? Hold on. CT add cart. Cart add. Oh. No, yep, Axios, dot put. Oh, I know why. I'm sorry, folks. I put the wrong endpoint. API / cart is what? That's a get. That's where we get the cart. I need to send it to the add endpoint. It's late in the day. Coding at night isn't always the best thing. Let's try that again. Let me refresh this. Let's add one item to the cart. Now that we're calling cart.-add, there we go. That's a little better. So let's test another thing. Let's go to another item. Let's say this one. Pick any one. Say I want to add 3 of these. Let's make sure that we're adding the quantity that we say we are. Add to cart. Go to cart. Looks like I got 3 of them there. Perfect. Here we can see we're totaling up our cart total with our little fancy reduce functionality there. And we are good to go. So now we're basically, we're almost complete with this application. We just have to wire up that little toast. And then we can start to go over things like different types of things we could do to extend this type of, we still have to make the footer, so we could do that. But that's just kind of markup anyway. We could start talking about if we needed to share state across many components, what would that look like? Because right now we're only holding state inside individual components, right? The rest of our data lives on the back end in our database. So we can start to talk about different ways to handle state across an application. And we'll also add in our toast thing tomorrow as well. Cool. So any questions so far? Are we getting this right now? Is it making sense?
There's a couple questions in the chat. One from Susan specifically.
Is there any harm if you left a quantity? No. It's totally fine. Yeah, that's just shorthand syntax for saying, hey, the key is the same name as the variable name. So you don't need the colon if you don't want it. There was a time where you had to do that. You had to do name, colon, name. But latest version of JavaScript, you do not. Yes, I understand. So it's a loop until the length is reached, return value. Oh, that was the, yes, correct. Return loops through the length of an array, adds the elements, returns a value. Yeah, essentially. Yep. You got it. Cool. Any other questions before we do our 30-second surveys?
I will send it.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions for tonight? Was this enjoyable? Was this fun watching this thing come to life? Some of it seems a little tedious, right? But it's just like typing up HTML, except now you've got some JavaScript wrapped around it for some cool functionality. So cool, awesome. So I will, well, that's cool, glad to know. Awesome, yeah, so if there's no other questions, we shall see you all tomorrow, where we'll finish up the product detail page with that fun little toast component. And then we'll start talking about different aspects that we could add to this application. They're not necessarily in the completed application code. So anything we do beyond tomorrow, as it relates to this application, you'll want to have that stuff stored, as you're typing it out, you're going to want to save it in your working folder. I could also update, push the changes to the working folder as well. But as far as what we'll cover for the first half of tomorrow, this application will be done and should match up to what's in the completed folder. So anything beyond that will be extra. So it looks like we're able to complete this early. So that's awesome. So we can start talking about a little bit more intermediate type of stuff. All right, cool. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.
Mel, did you still want help with something?
Yes, but my question was kind of unrelated to what we got going on today. It was about my commit issues in GitHub.
Oh, okay. Well, do you want to, we can try to work